I never thought I'd see the day he'd try to convince me that his affair was my fault, that I'd somehow pushed him into it, as if betrayal were something I'd volunteered for. But the day his mistress showed up at our door, eyes red, voice trembling, something happened that none of us were prepared for. They say every lie starts small. His started like a whisper and grew until it filled every corner of our life. Let's say his name was Ryan, the kind of man people describe as dependable. Always put together, always reasonable, the one who never raises his voice because he doesn't need to. To everyone else, he was the definition of stability. To me, he was a slow erosion dressed as calm. It began with little corrections. You're imagining things. You're just tired. Don't make everything so dramatic. Each line sounded harmless, but together they became a cage. At first, I believed him. It's easy to trust someone who seems composed when you feel like you're falling apart. And he knew how to weaponize that, how to make my emotion look like instability, how to turn my instincts into punchlines. When he started working later, I didn't question it. When his phone lived face down on the table, I told myself privacy wasn't betrayal. Love teaches you to explain away discomfort until there's nothing left to feel. Then the patterns began. Late-night client dinners, weekends catching up on reports, a new cologne he swore someone at the office had recommended. I noticed everything but said nothing. He trained me to treat curiosity like accusation. The first real crack appeared one Friday evening. I found a hotel receipt tucked in his jacket pocket. 2 nights, 1 room, paid in cash. My stomach dropped, but he didn't flinch when I held it up. This again, he sighed. You need to stop inventing stories in your head. He sounded exhausted, not guilty. That tone, patient, disappointed, hurt more than any confession could. It made me feel like the problem wasn't what he'd done, but who I was. So I apologized. For finding evidence of an affair, for hurting his feelings with my suspicion. I stood there, saying sorry for noticing what was right in front of me. That's the cruel genius of gaslighting. It makes you the villain in your own story. Weeks passed. The distance between us grew quiet and polite. He slept in the guest room to clear his mind, stopped asking about my day, started smiling at his phone instead of me. And when I finally confronted him again, he looked at me with that same false serenity. I didn't want this, he said, but you've been impossible lately. You shut down. You don't make me feel wanted. He said it like he was confessing my sin, like cheating was therapy I'd driven him to. I remember standing there, numb, thinking how easily he'd rewritten the script, how skillfully he turned cause into effect. By the end of that night, I wasn't even angry. I was convinced I'd failed him. But truth doesn't stay buried forever. It leaks through the cracks, waiting for the moment you finally stop defending it. That moment came one quiet Sunday morning. The air outside was pale and still. I was washing dishes when a knock echoed through the house, gentle, hesitant. When I opened the door, a woman stood there, late 20s, pale, eyes swollen from crying. She looked like she'd been practicing her words all night and still didn't know where to start. "Hi," she whispered. "Are you Ryan's wife?" Something inside me braced. "Yes." Quote. She nodded, her breath catching. "I didn't know. I swear I didn't know until last week. He told me you two were separated." Her voice cracked. I needed to tell you I'm sorry." And right then, behind me, I heard his footsteps in the hallway. Fast, startled, breaking his own calm for the first time in years. "Megan?" he said, his voice sharp with panic. "What are you doing here?" And in that instant, I knew. Every lie he'd ever told was about to turn on him. The sound of his voice hit the air like a slammed door. Sharp, panicked, not the calm, steady tone he'd used to gaslight me for months. This was raw, cracked open, desperate. "Megan?" he repeated, stepping into view. His expression flickered. Confusion, recognition, then fear. The kind that comes when someone realizes the story they've been selling is about to expire. She froze. Her eyes darted between us, from my face to his, as if trying to reconcile the two realities she'd been living in. "You said she moved out," she whispered. He blinked, processing too slowly. "Megan, let's not do this here." "You lied to me," she said, louder now. The words came out broken, heavy with disbelief. "You said you were divorced." I stood perfectly still. I didn't speak. I didn't even breathe. I just watched him unravel in real time, every ounce of confidence leaking out of him like air from a punctured tire. "Can we please just go inside?" he hissed. "You're making this worse." She laughed, dry, bitter. "Oh, am I? Because from where I'm standing, it's already pretty bad." The street was quiet, except for the sound of someone's sprinkler ticking in the distance. Neighbors were probably peeking through blinds, piecing together fragments of our private disaster. "Ryan," I said softly, "why don't you let her finish?" He turned to me, startled. "Linda, please, this isn't real?" I asked, "because she seems pretty real to me." His mouth opened, then closed. He looked small suddenly, smaller than I'd ever seen him. Megan shook her head. "I should have known." The late replies. The way you'd never let me tag you in anything. How you'd disappear on weekends. God, I was so stupid. She wiped her face with her sleeve, voice trembling. "You made me feel guilty for wanting honesty." Something about that line struck me. Guilty for wanting honesty. I knew that feeling. I'd lived it for years. He stepped forward, reaching for her arm. "Megan, stop. We'll talk about this later." She pulled back, glaring at him. "There is no later." Then she turned to me. "I didn't come here to start drama. I just thought you deserved to know the truth. From me, not from him." The apology in her voice wasn't forced. It was heartbreak layered with shame. And strangely, I didn't hate her. Not even a little. I pitied her. Because I knew exactly how it felt to be manipulated by a man who made lies sound reasonable. I nodded. "Thank you," I said quietly. Her shoulders sagged with relief. "I'm sorry," she whispered again, "for everything." Ryan's patience finally snapped. "Enough. You two don't get to turn this into some sisterhood moment. You're both overreacting." The silence that followed was so sharp it felt physical. He'd said that word again. Overreacting. His favorite weapon. The word he used to cut me down every time I got too close to the truth. Only this time, it didn't land. Not on her. Not on me. Megan looked at him, stunned. "You really just said that?" Quote. I almost laughed, but it came out as something colder. It's his reflex. He says it when reality doesn't cooperate. He glared at me. "You think you're innocent in all this?" I tilted my head. "Compared to what?" His voice rose. "You pushed me away. You never listened. You never supported me." "And so you cheated?" I interrupted, calm as glass. "That's your logic?" He stammered something incoherent, searching for his usual calm tone, but it was gone. Every word came out shaky, cornered, exposed. Megan turned to me again. "He told me you were controlling, that you didn't let him have friends, that you—" "Of course he did," I said. "He always needs a villain. Otherwise, he'd have to look at himself." She nodded slowly, realization dawning across her face. Then she looked back at him one last time. "You need help, Brian. Not from either of us." With that, she left. No yelling, no theatrics, just the sound of her heels on concrete fading down the street. He stood there, still at the doorway, breathing hard, the perfect man stripped bare in daylight. I watched him for a long moment, then stepped back inside. "Close the door," I said quietly. He didn't move. I said, "Close it," I repeated, not raising my voice. This time, he obeyed. When the latch clicked, the silence that followed wasn't peaceful. It was suffocating. And for the first time, I wasn't the one gasping for air. I poured myself a glass of water, took a slow sip, and finally looked at him. "You know," I said softly, "for someone who prides himself on control, you really don't handle honesty well." He didn't answer. He just stared at the floor, face pale, hands trembling slightly. And in that moment, I realized something. This wasn't the end of his lies. It was just the end of me believing them. Before the lies and the apologies and the trembling woman at my door, there were Sunday mornings that smelled like pancakes and coffee and something close to happiness. Back then, Ryan wasn't the man who'd rewrite history to save himself. He was charming in the kind of way that felt earned, patient, composed, thoughtful. He remembered birthdays, opened doors, asked about my day like it mattered. The kind of man who made people say, "You're lucky." I used to believe them. We met at a friend's dinner party. He was confident without being loud, funny without trying too hard. When he spoke, people listened. When he looked at me, I felt like the only person in the room. That's how manipulation always starts, disguised as attention. In the beginning, I mistook his precision for care. He liked things neat, predictable, under control. He never yelled, never lost his temper. He didn't have to. He could make his disappointment feel like silence you wanted to fill with apologies. He had this way of turning calm into dominance. If I ever got upset, he'd just wait. Let me talk myself into guilt. "You're overreacting again," he'd say gently, and that was the end of it, because who argues with calm? I remember the first time he said it. We'd been dating for 6 months. I was upset that he'd canceled our plans at the last minute, again, for work. I told him I felt brushed aside. He looked at me with that soft, rehearsed smile and said, "You really need to stop taking everything so personally." And I believed him, because I wanted to be easy. I wanted to be loved more than I wanted to be right. He started small, correcting how I told stories in front of people, rephrasing my jokes. "It's not what you said, it's how you said it." It sounded caring at first, like coaching. But over time, I started editing myself around him. My voice got quieter, my opinions safer. That's how abusers operate. Their cruelty is never loud in the beginning. It's polite, it's logical, it hides behind, "I'm just trying to help." The first real argument we had was about my job. I'd been offered a promotion, one that would mean longer hours and occasional travel. He congratulated me, then paused. "I just worry it's going to change you," he said. "How?" I asked. He smiled. "You're already stressed. You don't handle pressure well, and I like you how you are." I turned down the promotion 2 days later. I told myself I was choosing love over ambition. Looking back, I was choosing comfort over myself. The months blurred into patterns. His routines became law. Monday dinners at home, Fridays with his friends, Sundays for errands. My life fit neatly into the spaces he left available. If I ever broke the rhythm, like the time I went out with coworkers after work without telling him, he'd go quiet for hours. Not angry, just disappointed. "I'm not mad," he said. "I just thought we respected each other enough to communicate." He made me feel like I was constantly failing an exam I hadn't agreed to take. My friends started noticing. "You're different lately," one of them said over drinks. "Quieter, careful." I laughed it off, said I was just tired. But part of me knew she was right. I was becoming smaller, more manageable, exactly what he wanted. The emotional distance came later, so slow I almost didn't notice. Fewer touches, shorter kisses. The warmth replaced by politeness. When I asked if something was wrong, he sighed, "You're imagining things again." That phrase became a lullaby. He said it so often I started humming it in my head whenever doubt tried to speak. And then, one night, he didn't come home. No call, no message, just silence. When he finally walked in past midnight, he looked surprised that I was awake. "Why are you up?" he asked. "I was worried," I said. He shrugged. "You worry too much." He kissed my forehead, said, "Go back to bed," and that was the end of it. I told myself it was normal. I told myself he loved me. But love doesn't make you feel like you're trespassing in your own life. It would be months before I found the first receipt, before his lies began to show through the cracks. But even then, part of me already knew, because by that point, I'd started catching glimpses of the truth in the mirror. How my eyes looked tired. How my voice no longer sounded like mine. The affair wasn't the beginning of the betrayal. It was just the proof. Ryan didn't just lie with words. He lied with presence. Everywhere we went, people saw what he wanted them to see. a calm, devoted husband, composed and considerate. He had this way of making people feel safe around him, like he was the adult in every room. And in a world where men like that are currency, he was rich. He played the part flawlessly. He sent flowers to my office just because. He remembered birthdays, anniversaries, my coworkers, names. At parties, he'd slide an arm around my waist, smile at me like I was his favorite secret. People envied us. "You two are so solid," they'd say, and he'd beam with modest pride. I used to glow when they said it too. I wanted it to be true. But the truth was quieter than laughter, quieter than kindness. It lived in the way he'd squeeze my hand just a little too hard when I said something that didn't fit his script, in the way he'd lower his voice when correcting me. Never enough for anyone else to hear, but just enough to remind me who held the narrative. He knew that charm is a form of power, and he wielded it carefully. At home, that charm faded into precision. He liked his shirts folded a certain way, his coffee poured just below the rim, his space undisturbed. If I forgot something, burned toast, left lights on, he'd give me that same disappointed look teachers reserve for students who should have known better. "Relax," he'd say if I got defensive. "I'm just trying to help you improve." Improve. What a gentle word for erasure. At dinners with friends, he was the life of the table. He told funny stories about our vacations, careful edits of real events where he always looked patient and I always looked silly but lovable. The laughter felt warm, but I learned to hear the subtext. I was the punchline in my own relationship. Wrapped in humor, everyone applauded. He'd reach over, touch my arm, and say, "You know she's dramatic," like it was an inside joke we shared. And I'd smile, because what else was I supposed to do? No one ever notices how a joke feels when it's about you. Eventually, even my friends started echoing him. "You do get worked up easily," they'd tease. "He's good for you, balances you out." They meant well, but each time they said it, I felt something inside me retreat further. If everyone around me agreed I was too much, maybe I was. That's how isolation works. It doesn't happen in a single moment. It's cumulative, like fog, one breath at a time, until you can't remember what clear air feels like. The strange thing was, I started missing him even when he was home. He'd sit beside me on the couch, scrolling his phone, face lit by the glow of another world I wasn't allowed to see. If I asked what he was reading, he'd say, "Work emails. Always work. Always just enough truth to make the lie sound harmless." One night, I leaned in to kiss him, and he flinched. Not dramatically, just enough for me to feel it. I pulled back. "What's wrong?" He smiled. "Nothing. You just caught me off guard." But his eyes gave him away. He was somewhere else, already half gone. Soon, the intimacy between us turned mechanical. Conversations shrank to logistics. The words "I love you" became autopilot, punctuation to fill the silence. And when I tried to bring it up, he said I was reading too much into things. "You're emotional," he said. "That's what I love about you, but you can't let it control you." He used to say love, but what he really meant was leverage. The cruelest part? He never yelled. Not once. Not even when I found the first hints of her. Text notifications at midnight, perfume that didn't belong to me, the vague excuses that didn't need to make sense because his calmness made them sound true. He would just look at me with quiet frustration, like I was the problem for noticing. "You've changed," he said one night, as if that was an accusation. "You used to trust me." "I used to know you," I replied. He smiled faintly, the kind of smile people use before saying something final. "Maybe you still do. You just don't like what that means anymore." And maybe he was right. Maybe I did know him too well. Maybe that's why I felt the ground shifting long before the proof appeared. Every mask eventually slips. And when his did, it wasn't loud or dramatic. It cracked quietly, in the smallest of moments. A lie told too confidently, a phone locked too fast, a heartbeat that stuttered at the wrong name. I didn't call him out. Not yet. Because when someone builds their entire identity on control, the most dangerous thing you can do is let them think you're still under it. So I smiled. I cooked dinner, I kept the rhythm going. And behind that rhythm, I waited. Because somewhere in the cracks of his perfection, the truth was starting to breathe. The truth didn't explode, it unfolded. It started one ordinary Thursday evening, the kind that looks unremarkable until you realize it's the moment everything shifts. Ryan had said he'd be home late. Client dinner, of course. That phrase had become our lullaby, predictable and numbing. I didn't even ask anymore. I just nodded, smiled, pretended not to notice that his cologne lingered long after he was gone. But that night, something felt different. Maybe it was the silence. Maybe it was the way the air seemed too still, too staged. Or maybe I'd just finally stopped lying to myself. Around 10 p.m., I went to grab a sweater from his office, the one room he liked to keep organized. He'd always told me not to touch his desk. You'll mess up my system. I used to think he was just meticulous. Now I know it was something closer to paranoia. When I opened the drawer to look for a pen, a folded piece of paper caught my eye. A receipt. Hotel name, 2 nights, 1 room, champagne on the bill. My stomach tightened. I'd seen this movie before, only this time I didn't cry. I just stared at the date. 2 weeks ago. The same weekend he'd told me he was visiting his brother. I stood there for a long time, the paper trembling slightly in my hand. The old me would have confronted him immediately, demanded an explanation. The new me, the one he'd trained to doubt her own reactions, sat down and started writing dates in a notebook, quietly, methodically. Receipts, late nights. Phone calls, little inconsistencies I'd brushed aside. The pattern was there. I just hadn't wanted to see it. By the time he came home, I'd already built the timeline. He walked in humming, loosened his tie, kissed my forehead. You're still up? Couldn't sleep, I said, sliding the notebook shut. He poured himself a drink, casual as ever. Long day. Clients are exhausting. I bet, I murmured. My voice sounded too calm even to me. He leaned against the counter, studying me. You okay? You look distant. I'm fine, I lied. Just tired. He smiled, reassured, and went upstairs. He never noticed the faint smell of unfamiliar perfume clinging to his jacket. When I finally went to bed, I didn't sleep. I just watched the ceiling, listening to his even breathing beside me. How could someone sleep so soundly wrapped in deceit? The next day, I decided to stop guessing. He left for work early. I waited an hour, then opened his laptop. The password was the same one he'd used for everything. Our anniversary. How poetic. I wasn't sure what I expected. Maybe messages, maybe proof I could still deny. What I found was worse. An email thread with her. Megan. No romantic nicknames, no dramatic declarations. Just familiarity. Ease. Dinner tonight? You free after the meeting? The kind of normal that only comes from practice. Then came the photo attachment. A selfie. The two of them smiling at a restaurant I knew. One we'd gone to for our first anniversary. My breath caught. I zoomed in on the background. Same corner table. Same candlelight. Same wine glasses. He had taken her to our table. The rage didn't come right away. It was slower, heavier, like grief. I thought of every time I'd defended him, every time I'd made myself smaller to fit his version of reality. And still, part of me wanted to believe there was a mistake. I closed the laptop and waited. I didn't text him, I didn't cry. I just sat in the quiet, feeling the weight of truth settle into my bones. That evening he came home carrying takeout, smiling like nothing had changed. Surprise, he said, holding up the bag. I thought you could use a night off. I stared at him, the nerve it takes to betray someone and still call it kindness. Thanks, I said softly, taking the food. That's thoughtful. See, he said, kissing my temple. We're fine. He didn't notice my hands were shaking. Later that night, when he showered, I opened his phone. Same messages, same name. I scrolled further and stopped at one line that made my pulse go cold. She's suspicious again. Don't worry, I'll handle it. Handle it. Like I was a problem to be managed. I stared at the screen until the words blurred. Then, for the first time in months, I smiled, a small, deliberate smile, because now I had proof, not just of the affair, but of the manipulation that had built the foundation under it. When he came out of the shower, towel slung low, humming some careless tune, I looked at him and thought, "You really think this story still belongs to you?" He had no idea that by morning it wouldn't, because I wasn't going to confront him yet, not with tears, not with rage. The next time he lied, I was going to let him finish the sentence, and then let the truth do the talking for me. The morning after I found the messages, he kissed me goodbye like always. Same cologne, same routine, same performance. He didn't notice that my smile was practiced too, or that the version of me standing in that doorway wasn't the same one he'd left behind the night before. He had no idea I'd stopped reacting and started observing. I watched his car disappear down the street, the taillights fading into daylight. Then I went to work on my own kind of project. I opened his laptop again, copied every email thread, every receipt, every digital breadcrumb he'd left scattered across his carefully curated life. I didn't want revenge. Not yet. I wanted truth with timestamps. I wanted a record of the lies that would no longer bend to his version of events. By noon, I had it all. Hotel confirmations, payment logs, and screenshots that spelled out a pattern even he couldn't talk his way around. Looking at them didn't hurt anymore. It felt clinical, precise, the kind of clarity you get when the anesthesia of denial finally wears off. That evening, he came home earlier than usual. Traffic was light, he said, dropping his keys on the counter. Figured we could do dinner together. He always came home early when he felt the guilt catching up, as if being physically present could disguise emotional absence. We cooked side by side in silence. He poured wine, asked about my day, smiled that easy smile that had once disarmed me. It didn't work anymore. "Fine," I said. "Quiet." He nodded. "That's good. We needed some quiet." The irony almost made me laugh. Over the next few days, I became an actress in my own life. Calm, affectionate, predictable. He relaxed. He thought he'd won again. He even started humming while shaving, sending little love you texts from work like a man doing penance for a crime he thought would stay buried. But lies have a shelf life, and his were starting to spoil. One night, his phone rang while he was in the shower. The screen flashed, "Megan, work." I let it ring once, twice, then hit answer. I didn't say a word. I just listened. "Hey," her voice said softly. "You didn't call. Are you okay?" Silence. "Ryan, hello?" I hung up before the third question. He came out a minute later, towel slung around his shoulders, steam curling behind him. "Did my phone ring?" I looked up from the couch. "Yeah. Wrong number." He froze. Just a flicker, but enough for me to see it, that tiny crack in his composure. From then on, I watched the cracks multiply. He'd slip up mid-sentence, forget which lie he'd told, lose his patience faster. His calm wasn't natural anymore. It was effort, and effort is visible when you know what to look for. On Saturday, while we were grocery shopping, a woman from his office spotted us in the produce aisle. "Oh, Ryan," she said brightly, "I didn't know you were married." The way his hand tightened around the cart handle told me everything. "You never talk about me at work?" I asked once she left. He forced a laugh. "I like to keep my personal life private." "Seems like you've been doing a great job at that," I said. That night, he barely ate dinner. He started spending more time outside, phone calls on the porch, quick errands, late-night drives to clear his head. I stopped asking questions. I just wrote them down. Every absence had a time, a date, and a duration. Every lie had a beginning, middle, and soon-to-be end. The unraveling wasn't loud. It was slow and steady, the sound of a man losing his own narrative. One evening, I walked into the living room to find him staring at his reflection in the dark TV screen. He didn't hear me at first. When he did, he blinked, startled, like he'd been caught talking to himself. "You okay?" I asked. He smiled too fast. "Just tired." I nodded. "You look it." When he went to bed, I stayed up, scrolling through the evidence one last time. Proof doesn't heal you. It just stops the bleeding long enough to realize how deep the wound went. That night, I sent a single message, not to him, to her. You deserve to know the truth. He's been lying to both of us. No anger, no threats, just facts. And when she replied, only minutes later, I had a feeling, can we talk? I knew the end of his performance wasn't coming someday. It was already here. He just hadn't noticed that the audience had changed sides. It happened on a Saturday afternoon that felt too peaceful for what was about to unravel. The air was warm, the kind that carries the hum of distant lawnmowers and the faint smell of someone else's barbecue. Ordinary. That's the cruel thing about betrayal. It doesn't pick storms or drama. It hides inside ordinary days, waiting for the knock that changes everything. I was folding laundry when it came. 3 short knocks, hesitant, like the person on the other side wasn't sure they should be there. I opened the door, and there she was, Megan, her hair pulled back, face pale, eyes swollen. She looked like someone who hadn't slept in days. For a second, we just stared at each other, both of us suspended in the realization that we weren't supposed to exist in the same frame. "Hi," she said softly. "I know this is strange. I just needed to see you." Her voice cracked on, "See you." I didn't speak. I just stepped aside and nodded toward the living room. "Come in." She hesitated, then crossed the threshold, clutching her purse like a life raft. She sat on the edge of the couch, hands trembling. The last time I'd seen her, it had been through the glow of his phone screen. Now she was real and terrified. "I'm not here to fight," she said quickly. I found out the truth. About everything." She looked up, eyes glossy. "He told me you were separated, that you'd been over for months, that you didn't want him anymore." I took a slow breath. He's been recycling that line for years. Her lips trembled. I believed him. God, I was so stupid. "No," I said quietly. "You were lied to. That's different." Her eyes filled. "You're not angry?" I shook my head. "Not at you." And that was the truth. The anger I used to have, the rage, the heartbreak, it had burned out long before she showed up. What was left wasn't forgiveness, but clarity. We sat in silence for a moment. The house felt too still, as if even the walls were holding their breath. Then, like the universe was running out of patience for subtlety, I heard the sound of keys in the front door. Her head snapped toward the noise. I didn't move. Ryan stepped inside, grocery bag in hand, mid-sentence. "Hey, I didn't know we needed." The words died in his throat. He froze. The bag slipped from his hand, oranges rolling across the floor, bumping softly against Megan's shoes. The silence that followed was the kind you could feel in your teeth. He looked from me to her, back to me, his mouth opened, closed, opened again. "What? What is this?" Megan stood up, voice shaking. "You told me she was gone." He swallowed hard, jaw tightening. "I can explain." "Then explain," I said. My voice was calm, too calm. "This seems like a good time." He stepped forward, palms out like someone defusing a bomb. "Okay, everyone just take a breath." "Don't," I said quietly. "Don't tell us to breathe. You don't get to narrate this anymore." He blinked, thrown off. The man who could talk his way out of anything suddenly had no script. "Linda," he started, "you've been distant for months. We were falling apart, and you—" I cut him off. Don't you dare make this my fault." Megan turned to him, anger beginning to replace the shock. "You told me she didn't care about you, that she was cold, that she'd moved on." His voice pitched higher. "I didn't say it like that." "You did," she snapped. "You said she was the reason you couldn't be happy." Every word was a mirror, reflecting back the version of himself he'd spent years curating. And now it was shattering, one truth at a time. I crossed my arms. "You really had a script for both of us, didn't you? The wife and the escape plan. How efficient." "Stop twisting this," he shouted, finally losing the calm that had always protected him. I didn't mean for it to happen like this." "Of course you didn't," I said. "You never mean anything, Ryan. You just do it and wait for someone else to apologize." He turned to Megan. "You shouldn't have come here." Her chin lifted. "No, I should have come here a long time ago." The words hung in the air like judgment. He looked back at me, searching for some fragment of control to cling to. "What do you want me to say?" "Nothing," I said. "I'm done listening." He looked at me, then at her, realizing there was no version of this moment he could rewrite. The women he'd divided his life between were standing side by side, and both had stopped believing him. The silence stretched. Then Megan picked up her purse, wiped her eyes, and said to me, "I'm really sorry." I nodded. "Me too." And with that, she left, quietly, gracefully, like someone walking away from a fire she no longer felt responsible for. Ryan stood in the doorway, staring after her. Then he turned back to me, voice barely above a whisper. "You had to bring her here?" I almost laughed. "You invited her into both our lives. She just finally showed up." He didn't respond. He just sank onto the couch, face in his hands, the weight of exposure settling into his bones. I poured myself a glass of water, took a slow sip, and said, "Well, at least now it's a fair game. Everyone knows the truth." And for the first time in years, the silence between us wasn't confusing. It was honest. After Megan left, the house felt hollow, like sound didn't know where to go anymore. Ryan sat on the couch, elbows on his knees, staring at the floor as if the grain in the wood might rearrange itself into a way out. I stood near the kitchen island, the only space between us, the weight of everything unsaid. He broke first. "This is insane," he muttered, running a hand through his hair. "She shouldn't have come here. You shouldn't have let her in." I tilted my head. "You mean the woman you lied to? The one you used? The one you told was single me? She just became real, Ryan. That's not on me." He stood suddenly, pacing. "You've been waiting for this, haven't you? Some big moment where I mess up and you get to play the victim." I almost laughed. "Ryan, you didn't mess up. You planned this. You curated your own downfall, one lie at a time." He stopped moving, eyes flashing. "You think you're so calm, so righteous, but you don't even realize how cold you've become." There it was, the old refrain, the accusation that had always reset the power dynamic, only now it landed flat. I leaned against the counter, arms folded. "You really need new material." He stared at me, breathing hard. "Do you even hear yourself? You're smug, detached, like this is entertaining for you." "It's not entertaining," I said quietly. "It's closure. I'm watching the story you wrote finally tell the truth." He flinched. His calm slipped again. "You've been destroying us for months with your suspicion, your paranoia." "Stop," I said. The word came out sharper than I expected. "You don't get to call it paranoia when the proof has names, dates, and hotel receipts." Silence, the kind that hums. He looked at me for a long time, eyes hard, face tight, and then, softer, almost pleading, "Can we just start over, please? We can fix this." I blinked slowly. "We? There is no we. There's you and your reflection." He took a step closer. "I made mistakes. People make mistakes." I didn't move. "People make mistakes. Liars make patterns." That landed. The muscles in his jaw twitched. His breath quickened. For the first time, he didn't look like the composed, patient man everyone admired. He looked cornered, stripped of the control that had always made him feel safe. He turned away, muttering, "You'll regret this." I almost whispered, "Already did." Quote. He spun back around. "What do you want from me, Linda?" "Nothing," I said. "That's the part that scares you, isn't it? That I finally want nothing." The words hit like a punch. He sagged slightly, as if the realization itself knocked the wind out of him. Then came the silence. Not heavy, not even angry, just final, the kind of silence that doesn't need to win. He dropped onto the couch again, eyes glassy, voice low. "You think this makes you strong? Watching everything fall apart?" I sat across from him. "No. What makes me strong is finally not blaming myself for what you did." He looked at me, really looked, and for the first time, I saw it, recognition. Maybe even shame. It passed quickly, replaced by exhaustion. He whispered, "You're going to tell everyone, aren't you?" I shook my head. "I don't have to. You already did." He frowned. "What does that mean?" "Your calm, your performance, that fake perfection you wore like armor, it's gone. People see you now. They'll fill in the blanks themselves." He laughed bitterly. "You're cruel." "No," I said softly, "I'm done being your excuse." He didn't respond. Just stared at the floor again, shoulders caved in. The man who once filled every room now looked small, almost ordinary. I stood, walked to the door, and said the words that finally felt right. "You can stay tonight if you need to figure out where to go, but by tomorrow morning this house won't be yours anymore." He didn't argue, didn't beg, just nodded once, numb. When I went upstairs, I could still hear him breathing, slow, uneven, like someone learning what silence actually sounds like. I closed the bedroom door, leaned against it, and let out a breath that didn't tremble. For years, I'd been afraid that ending it would feel like failure. Instead, it felt like freedom disguised as quiet. Downstairs, he shifted on the couch, restless. Upstairs, I finally slept through the night. Morning sunlight crept across the floor like it was testing the room for danger. The air still felt heavy, thick with everything that had been said and everything that hadn't. I lay there for a few seconds before I remembered. There would be no performance today. No pretending, no corrections, no soft voice saying I was too emotional. Downstairs, the house was still. He was gone. The couch was empty except for the dent where he'd sat, and a single coffee mug. Mine. His keys were missing from the hook by the door, but his jacket still hung there, abandoned. It was almost poetic. The version of himself he wore most often was the one he couldn't take with him. I made coffee and waited for guilt to show up. It didn't. Instead, peace came, small, quiet, unfamiliar. For the first time, I could hear the hum of the refrigerator, the birds outside, the sound of my own breath not rushing to fill the silence. The house had been a stage for so long that I'd forgotten what silence without tension sounded like. Around noon, my phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number. "Ryan, I'll come by later to get the rest of my things. I'll leave the keys." No apology, no explanation, just logistics, the emotional equivalent of a receipt. I typed one word back. "Okay." Then I turned the phone face down and walked away. He arrived in the afternoon. I watched from the window as he parked, shoulders slumped, movements mechanical. The man who once filled every doorway now looked uncertain about crossing one. He didn't knock. He just opened the door slowly, like a guest in a place that used to belong to him. "I'll be quick," he said. "Take your time," I replied, voice calm. He moved through the house, collecting pieces of his old life, shoes, charger, cufflinks, the cologne that used to announce him before he entered a room. He didn't meet my eyes until the very end. "I never wanted to hurt you," he said quietly. I almost smiled. "You just didn't want to get caught." He swallowed hard. "You're different." "I'm free," I corrected. He looked like he wanted to argue but didn't have the energy. He placed the keys on the counter, paused, then said, "You'll tell people your version." "I don't need to," I said. "You already lived it for them." He nodded once, defeated. "Goodbye, Linda." "Goodbye, Ryan." When the door closed behind him, the sound echoed through the house like punctuation. Final. Solid. I stood there for a long time, just breathing. Then I opened the windows wide, letting the spring air pour in. It carried away the stale smell of his cologne, of old lies and quiet manipulation. The light felt different now. Not brighter, just honest. I spent the rest of the day reclaiming the space, washed the sheets, changed the curtains, rearranged the furniture so that every trace of his symmetry disappeared. I moved the couch slightly off-center, placed my favorite chair by the window, something he used to hate because it blocked the view. Now it was the view. Later, as the sun dipped low and the house turned gold, I made dinner just for myself. No negotiations over flavor, No commentary about portion sizes or too much salt. Just food, simple and good. Halfway through eating, I realized I was smiling, not the polite kind, but the one that comes from relief disguised as appetite. After the dishes were done, I walked to the doorway, the same one where Megan had stood, trembling and apologizing, and whispered a quiet thank you to the version of me who had opened that door instead of locking it. Because sometimes healing doesn't arrive dressed like hope. Sometimes it knocks wearing guilt and mascara streaks. When night fell, the house was mine again. No footsteps, no lies, no more waiting for proof that I wasn't crazy. Just quiet. And this time, it didn't feel empty. It felt earned. The days that followed didn't feel like victory. They felt like recovery. There were no fireworks, no cinematic closure, just quiet mornings where sunlight hit the kitchen counter exactly the way it used to, only now it was mine. Every sound in the house had changed meaning. The creak in the hallway no longer signaled tension. It was just wood settling. The silence between rooms wasn't loaded. It was space. For a long time, I didn't know what to do with peace. It felt foreign, like a language I'd once spoken and forgotten. My body still expected his footsteps, his sighs, his presence bending the air. It took weeks for my heartbeat to stop syncing with his schedule. But slowly the world began to fill in. I started walking again, early mornings when the city was half asleep and everything smelled like wet pavement and beginnings. I'd pass the same elderly man sweeping his porch, the same woman jogging with her dog, both strangers who became markers of normalcy. I started talking to baristas, buying flowers, listening to music I'd stopped playing because he said it was too loud. Every small act was rebellion disguised as routine. The first time I laughed, really laughed, it startled me. I was watching some ridiculous sitcom, the kind with canned laughter, and something about it cracked me open. It wasn't joy yet, but it was life. People from the old world started reaching out, friends I'd pulled away from, family who'd learned not to ask questions. They said things like, "You seem lighter," and they were right. Not because the weight was gone, but because I'd finally stopped carrying what wasn't mine. Meanwhile, word about Ryan started to trickle back. Someone from his office mentioned he'd, quote, taken time off, which was corporate code for running from the mess he made. I didn't care. For the first time, his narrative didn't reach me. His story could go on without me in it, and that felt like freedom. One evening, while cleaning, I found one of his old notebooks wedged behind the bookshelf. I almost threw it away, but curiosity got the better of me. It was full of plans, business strategies, motivational quotes, goals for personal growth. At the bottom of one page, in his neat handwriting, it said, "Control is peace." I stared at it for a long time, then closed the notebook. He'd spent his whole life trying to control everything. Me, his image, his emotions, and he'd mistaken fear for peace. That was his tragedy. Mine was different. I didn't need control anymore. I just needed truth. I walked outside, sat on the porch, and watched the streetlights flicker on. For the first time, I didn't feel like I was waiting for something. I was just there. Present. Breathing. Later that night, I poured a glass of wine and put on my favorite record, the one he used to turn off halfway through. The room filled with sound, warm and imperfect. I caught my reflection in the window, hair messy, sweater slipping off one shoulder, eyes steady. I looked real, not polished, not performed, just real. And that's when I realized the shift wasn't about him leaving. It was about me returning to myself, to my voice, to the part of me that still believed I deserved a soft life after surviving a hard one. Freedom doesn't start when they go. It starts the moment you stop needing them to see you. That night before bed, I wrote one line in my journal. Peace is not the absence of emotion. It's the presence of honesty. And for the first time in years, I slept without dreams. Starting over doesn't feel like a movie montage. There's no music cue, no sudden clarity. It's messy, slow, and beautifully ordinary. I didn't move cities or change my name. I just started showing up for my own life again. The first thing I bought for myself wasn't furniture or clothes. It was time. A few hours every morning where no one could reach me. No emails, no noise. Just quiet and coffee and the realization that peace doesn't have to be earned. My world rebuilt itself one small habit at a time. I painted the walls a warm shade of cream, the kind that made the light feel generous. I filled the bookshelves with novels I'd never had time to read. I even bought a slightly crooked mug from a street market. Handmade, imperfect, real. Everything he hated, I now collected. I kept my ring in a small wooden box, not out of sentiment, but as evidence, proof of who I'd been and what I'd outgrown. Some scars you don't hide, you frame them. Work became easier. Friends noticed the difference before I did. "You sound like yourself again," one of them said over lunch. "I think I am," I replied. Even my reflection began to look different. Not prettier, just steadier. I'd stopped bracing every time I looked in the mirror. One Sunday, I drove out of the city to the coast. The kind of spontaneous thing he'd have hated because it didn't fit the schedule. I parked near the cliffs, wind whipping through my hair, salt sticking to my skin, the ocean below roaring like applause for anyone who'd ever walked away and meant it. I stood there for a long time, breathing in air that didn't ask for permission. At one point, my phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number. For a second, my stomach tightened with an old instinct. Then I opened it. Just wanted to say I'm sorry for everything. R. No name, but none was needed. I stared at it, the blue light reflecting off my hand, and for the first time, I didn't feel anything. Not anger, not longing, not even closure, just calm. I deleted it and watched the ocean erase its own waves. That evening, back home, I made dinner with music playing loud enough to shake the windows. I danced barefoot in the kitchen, sauce simmering, wine glass half full. No one to correct me, no one to narrate it, just life, unedited, imperfect, mine. Later, I lit a candle and sat by the window. Outside, the city hummed its quiet night rhythm. Inside, everything felt balanced. Freedom, I realized, isn't loud. It's not a scream or a declaration. It's the steady rhythm of existing without fear. It's walking through your home without shrinking. It's being able to trust your own silence again. I thought about the woman I used to be, the one who believed calm men were safe men. I wished I could tell her what I know now, that real safety isn't the absence of noise, it's the absence of lies. That night, before bed, I opened my journal and wrote a single line. I am no longer surviving him, I am living me. And for once, that felt like enough. People always ask what the lesson is, as if pain is only worth something when it leaves a quote behind. But the truth is, healing didn't come with a lesson at first. It came with silence, the kind that sits heavy in your chest after the storm, where you finally realize you don't have to explain yourself anymore. For months, I tried to make sense of everything, how someone could lie so easily, how love could turn into control, how I could lose myself without noticing. And then one day, I stopped trying to understand him and started understanding me. The hardest truth was this: not everyone who makes you feel calm is safe. Some people hide behind peace because it makes their chaos look dignified. Ryan was one of them. He used quiet like armor, logic like manipulation, patience like a leash. And I believed it because I wanted to, because I thought calmness meant goodness and emotional meant wrong. Now, I know better. Being emotional doesn't make you unstable. It means you feel. It means you notice. It means you're still alive enough to recognize what isn't love, even when someone keeps calling it that. If there's a lesson, it's this: never apologize for how loudly your heart warns you. Some people will call it overreacting. That's how they hide what they're doing. The truth is, emotional women aren't dramatic. We're just not asleep. When his mistress knocked on my door, I thought that was the end of my marriage. I was wrong. It was the beginning of my freedom. Sometimes justice doesn't look like revenge. It looks like peace that no one can take credit for. Now, when I wake up, I don't check for messages or tone or approval. I make my coffee, I watch the light move across the floor, and I thank every version of myself that refused to stay silent just to be loved. I used to think strength was holding everything together. Now I know it's letting go before you disappear inside someone else's version of you. So if you've ever been blamed for someone else's betrayal or made to feel crazy for noticing what's right in front of you, let me tell you this. You are not too emotional. You are simply awake in a world that benefits from your silence. Stay awake. Stay kind. And when the truth finally knocks, open the door. Has anything like this ever happened to you? Share your story in the comments.